Welcome back to the Diary of the CFO podcast, the space where you will always find real-world insight to become a better leader and be better at life. I'm your host, Wasia Kamon, and today I'm so delighted to have with me Stephen Newland. Over the past 15 years, Stephen has worked in finance roles in a variety of organizations, including nonprofits, startups, early-stage companies, and Fortune 500. Most recently, has ventured out on his own to create MoneyPath, a fractional CFO company focused on helping nonprofits and social entrepreneurs. He believes in making finance simple and actionable so these organizations can use the financial insight to drive their mission forward. What an amazing mission. Thank you so much for being on the show, Stephen.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I have followed you for a while, and I'm just excited to talk today.
Awesome. So before we dive in, will you please share about your career journey? What has been some unexpected, maybe twist and turn, and how you're now the owner and founder of MoneyPath?
Yeah, I'll try to do it quick, relatively quick. I'll kind of incorporate some twists and turns. I came out of school. I went to school in Cincinnati, and I got an internship with Delta Airlines in Atlanta at the time. And got a job there out of school, and I could not wait to get to a big city, like a bigger city. And I did that, and I came out in finance, corporate finance there. And I said, all right, I'm going to climb the ladder. That was my career goal. I'm going to climb the ladder. I'm going to go up the corporate rank, and that's what I'm going to do. And I did that for a few years, and I quickly realized maybe that sounded better in my head than, than reality. Along that time, I had been paying off all my student loans. And so I paid off about $55,000 over 4 years. That lit a passion in me of, I want to help other people. I have these skills in finance of budgeting and understanding numbers and doing analysis. I want to use that and help people. I want to help people do what I just did. 4 years in was my first career twist and turn. I stepped away from what I thought was a pretty good career trajectory at Delta. I had gotten 2 or 3 promotions over that 4-year span. And I went and worked at a large church here in Atlanta and ran their financial education program. So I did that for about 6 years.
Wow. It's my church, North Point Church.
Oh,
yes.
I don't think I knew that. Oh, no way. Yeah, so I worked at the Buckhead campus, and then I also worked at the North Point campus too. I did not know that. That's awesome. So I did that. Yeah, I did that for 6 years, and that was really, really love that experience. But there was also something there, which is leading to the next twist and turn. I really missed that business. I missed the business world. There was just something in me. I'm like, man, I just missed that. A business strategy that I just missed it. And so I went and helped a startup raise $1 million that was focused on helping people pay off debt and save money. So it was kind of a cool combination of helping people in that aspect and then also the business world. Did that, worked at a couple startups for a couple years, and then eventually worked at a fractional CFO firm that was helping startups. And then about a year ago, I just had this gnawing thing that it wasn't businesses that I really wanted to help. It was growing organizations that were out there doing some kind of mission in the world, helping people in some way. And so that's where I said, let me go do this. Let me build a business focused on helping nonprofits and social entrepreneurs who are building organizations that are just driving some sort of mission forward.
That's awesome. Now that you make the switch, and I want us to dive a little deeper here on your transition from for-profit to nonprofit, because I made that transition about 2 years ago, and there were things that I thought would be easier that were And so I want to know, what took you by surprise in that transition? What were some of the things?
I think the first thing is just interacting with the people. And I guess this could be different at varying organizations, but in the nonprofits I've worked with, this has been pretty true, is they tend to be a little bit more hey, let's just catch up. There's a little bit of a slower pace, and not necessarily in a bad way, but it's, you don't have that corporate pressure of we got to go, we got to hit this thing, we got to hit this deadline, we got a board or the stock market or whatever to worry about. That doesn't exist. And so there's more of a focus on people and helping. And so that tends to be a little bit of a slower approach with people. And so that was hard for me. I was very much a go, go, go. Let's get it done. That was one.
Okay. For me, another one was the compliance and regulations, the restricted, unrestricted revenues, conditional, unconditional. How did you deal with this part? Because they don't tell you that. You come in, you're like, oh, everybody's mission driven. They're passionate, like you said. Things may take some time, but you're working with people that are so passionate about what they do. But then when you're on the finance and accounting side, you have to deal with the other stuff.
100%. And there's also in the nonprofit world, I'm speaking mainly in Georgia, you have to get a financial review at $500,000 of revenue. And you have to do an audit at $1 million in revenue. A startup can go a long time without having to worry about any of that stuff until an investor says, hey, I need you to do this. But that might not be until $5 or $10 million of revenue. And so you've got more money to play with there. So to your point, I just kind of had to learn on the go. Okay, there's all these different things about, yeah, like you said, restricted, not unrestricted funds, and like making sure those stay very separate and you've got good systems in place for that. I just kind of flew the plane as it was in the sky and just learned it on the go, just like
Wow.
any other. Yeah.
That's impressive because to me, the learning curve was quite steep, even though I was a CPA. So, thinking about you coming from FP&A standpoint, what really helped you make that transition? Because it's not just a different business model. You're dealing with different type of accounting, and you have to predict and you have to forecast. And what does it mean in terms of FP&A making that switch from for profit to nonprofits?
I try to incorporate a lot of the same principles that I learned. I have found that in the nonprofit world, there tends to be not as much of a focus on cash flow forecasting for whatever reason. It tends to be
Mm-hmm.
just kind of living from one fundraising cycle to the next. And like, hey, we've
Mm-hmm.
got this next big event. Like, I've tried to really incorporate some of those best practices from the business world and FP&A and say, hey, the best businesses out there, the best organizations, they're looking 6, 9, 12 months into the future. And they understand that if I go hire this person now, what is that going to do to my cash in 12 months? And so I've tried to incorporate a lot of those principles into the work I do. I actually did an interviews with, I think it was 10 nonprofit leaders around Atlanta, all about $1 million and higher in the organizations. And I believe, I think it was 2 or 3 had mentioned they have some type of a forecast in place. And that blew me
Wow.
away. It completely blew me away that few organizations had a process in place.
Yes. And I'm not too surprised though, because when you think about like ERP system, accounting system, there's not a lot, I should say, that are geared toward not for profit. It's manufacturing, SaaS at best, but then I feel like we are kind of underserved when it comes to software and things like that. So how have you in your role helped guide the clients you've been working with?
It's a great question. I think it's getting better, but I agree. It is definitely underserved. I think a good example, like QuickBooks, they've
Mm-hmm.
got like a little bit of a separate version for nonprofit, but there's still some aspects of it that just completely don't work for nonprofit. And so what we've had to do is you just have to take it and, if you have to do another step in Excel, sometimes that's just what we have to do. So there are like more manual steps involved, but that's the only way. We've just had to find, more manual workarounds, but
But you're doing it. You're doing it.
that's exactly right. I will say there's a lot of really good CRMs in the nonprofit space, but I think there's definitely
Okay.
work to catch up on the accounting side. It's actually why part of why I started my business is I had kind of seen some of the messaging that some fractional CFO firms had towards nonprofits.
Mhm.
And it was generally like, here's who we serve. We serve startups and small businesses. And oh, by the way, we can also help nonprofits too. It was kind of just yeah, we can help you
Mm.
too. And I thought, man, they deserve better. That these are great
Yes,
organizations doing amazing work. Like they deserve someone who understands their organizations and can put this expertise to work in their organizations.
that's amazing. Yes, I feel that we are underserved. And I also feel like we don't always have the right talent. It's hard to attract people. Like I have positions open that I wanted to fill, but then I speak with other CFOs that are like, yeah, we need help too. How do you see that change, or what do you think we can do as an industry to attract more people in terms of finance and accounting?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's 2 things that have come to mind. I think what's interesting about I'm kind of on the tail end or the high end of the millennials. And it seems like some of the Gen Z and even younger millennials, they are starting to take a broader look at work as a whole
Mm,
does this align with what I want to do? Does this align with my values, my beliefs, my versus just, how much money can I make? I think that's very interesting. I think over time, now the money's got to be there or else people will, the economics have to
Yes.
work out at the end of the day. But I think that is interesting. I think that may start to creep a few more people who are willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to take a little bit less money and I'm willing to go work at an organization that kind of more aligns with what what I want to do in this world. There's also been a very interesting movement. There's a documentary that just came out. I think it's called Uncharitable. Don't quote me on that. I think it's called Uncharitable. Basically, he's saying, hey, as nonprofits, what can we do to start to bubble up the fact that nonprofit staff are typically underpaid versus market? And one of the things that, we've seen that has worked well is just tell your donors, hey, I need to pay my staff better because I need to keep them. They're leaving or they're getting burned out. And if they do that, we can't sustain our mission. And if you
Yes.
truly, truly, as a donor, believe in this mission, and we can pay our staff 10 or 20% more to get them aligned with market, we're going to keep them around and we're going to have a fantastic mission for the ongoing future. And so I think maybe nonprofits have just been nervous to communicate that directly to donors. But hey, if they're truly bought in, they should be fine with that.
Very true. And so I like what you said about what things align with my vision, my passion, and the work that I do. So at ACE, for example, Access to Capital for Entrepreneurs, we help underserved communities, entrepreneurs. So those that may not necessarily get a loan through a Wells Fargo or Bank of America, the big ones, because maybe it's the first time they're the first in the family, we can step in and help them with their business. So I was curious on your end, why don't you showcase or broadcast some of the great nonprofits that you've come into contact with, some of your clients or some people that you came into contact as you were growing your practice?
Yeah, you mean just give them a shout out?
Yes, please.
So a couple that I'll talk about. One doesn't exist anymore, and I was part of it. I was actually part of kind of shutting it down, but it did really, really good work. So I want to call it out. It's called Fallen Sparrow, and we help support children's homes in Cambodia. Cambodia's got a really deep history of kids not being able to be supported by families, and so that was some really impactful work. Another one is Buckhead Christian Ministry. I was on their board and was their treasurer for a number of years, for about a year as their treasurer. They help step in when someone's getting evicted or
Oh,
someone's just like,
wow.
hey, I lost my job and I don't have clothes to go interview for a new job, or I don't have a dress for the prom. They
Mm.
step in and fill the gaps for a lot of people. They do incredible work all around Georgia. The one I really love working with now is Atlanta Angels. They are focused on supporting the foster care community around Atlanta. They step in and help families that have foster children and also have a mentoring program for youth in foster care.
I love hearing it because it's amazing. Because when you think about it, the government is not going to do it for you. Like some of these niche needs that are happening, or Big Apple, for example, but they can donate. People can also help in the mission, which is so transformative for me, at least as an individual, being in finance and accounting and knowing that I'm working for mission-driven organization. I also volunteer with Hope. I think I told you about them, and we help low-income single parents complete an education degree so they can go from working or needing food stamp to owning a home because now they're a nurse, they graduated. So it's amazing, it's impactful, but it doesn't mean that the accounting and the finance of it is easy.
No, I often say it's harder. I think it's harder than like for-profit companies. It's just more complicated. I mean, if you think like a lot of for-profit companies, not all of them are using the classes. Like for example, in QuickBooks, for a nonprofit, you have to track not only your department spending, but you have to look at how is that being allocated across your administrative functions, your fundraising functions, and how much is going to services. It's just another wrinkle into the
I agree. I do think it's more difficult because I remember when I started at Lyft in the not-for-profit space, I heard about, we have these audits. If you get money from the federal government, you have to do a single audit. And I was joking at, it reminds me of Beyonce, all the single audits, all the single audits. Like you have to get a CFA. I was like, CFA, what is that? All these different terms that I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
Yeah, exactly. I know a lot of startups that don't have anywhere near the financial controls in place because they don't have to have an audit so early, and especially even like a government audit if you're taking government grants. Like,
Yes, it's the government grants. That's what gets you.
yep, yep.
all the time. So, what would you say is if you could rewind the clock, and what would you tell your past self to be better prepared for what you're doing now?
So I was really obsessed with the technical skills early on in my career. How do I do this Excel thing? And I think that was good. But I think what I really wish I would have paid more attention to was, after that fancy, pretty looking analysis that I was really proud of. And after I sent that off, I just kind of, okay, on to the next thing. I really
Mm-hmm.
wish I would have paid more attention to how my leaders took that information, processed it, and used it to make decisions.
Wow.
Because I know now that's basically what, as you get into any financial leadership role, that's what you do. I mean, how do I take this data or this piece of information and how do I use it to make better decisions for the organization? So I really wish I would have started paying attention to that more, as I think I would have honed some of those skills a little bit faster.
Can you give us more specific examples? So obviously, it sounds like storytelling. Like you took the financials. Storytelling will be one of them. What other ones would you specifically identify to you could have worked with sooner than later?
I think about when I was at Delta as an intern, I worked on the cargo team. And so I would put
Mm-hmm.
these analysis together and it would say, hey, our volume for this product was lower. Here's some things we can do with pricing. Here's maybe should we increase our price? Should we decrease our price? I just put together the analysis and said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, our volume is lower for this product in these markets. And I just sent it off to the leaders. I never followed up with them and said, well, hey, what decision? So you took that information, but like, how did you process that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
did you compare that analysis? Did you take that quantitative analysis and did you pair it up with maybe this other piece of information that you got from this other report or this
Mm-hmm.
conversation you had with this leader? Or did you make this decision just off this data? Like, that's one example of like, I wish I would have understood their decision making process.
Yes, because that's really what leadership is, making decisions. It's really all leaders do. You're in meetings all day. And really, what people expect from you is decide. How would you go here versus there? And that's when you have to be strategic. You have to be able to lead people to do certain things, even when you don't have the title necessarily. So it is a lot of things. And I've noticed too in my career that I was too on technical, technical, technical. For me, was having letters behind my name. So now I have more letters behind my name than in my name itself. It's a different topic. But again, I still felt somehow stuck in my career. And that's why I love your content on LinkedIn when you talk about all these other things that are not just, like you said, Excel, not just, oh, I send this deck and it's cute. I know how to do PowerPoint. And so, what do you think we need to do more of to raise that awareness in the next generation of leaders?
I think just being open and honest about like these conversations. And then, like you said, even on LinkedIn. So, one thing if I look back on what I wish I would have done differently is not underestimating the power of my network early in my career.
Mm,
I could have easily, like going back to that example of the analysis, I could have easily sat down with my boss at the time, or even a senior leader and said, "Hey, can I just buy you a cup of coffee? I just want to understand how you think about finance and how you think about decision making, or how you think." Most good leaders out there would give you 15 minutes, no problem.
yeah.
There's something in you when you have experience. Everyone has this innate desire to want to pass something along behind you. And
Yes.
so don't be afraid to ask. If they say no, okay, they say no. They're going to respect you for asking them. To me, there's
True.
no downside. I don't see downside. And so be willing to just DM somebody. If you're like, they're too big of an account on LinkedIn, DM them. Just ask them. Don't be afraid to just ask. That's my.
Oh, that's so good. It sounds very simple, but I think we self somehow limit ourselves, right? So there's also the skills that you have outside. So the skills people can see, good communication, excel. But I feel like there's also internal things like self limiting beliefs or imposter syndrome. Can you share a little bit more about, you probably went through this, you're starting your own practice, you're doing all these transitions. How are you navigating those type of things?
I would say I still have most probably daily. There's imposter syndrome that creeps in. Like, do I have what it takes? Can I really do this? What if I don't have
Mm-hmm.
what if I don't have all the answers for every financial question that they come up with? And it's just,
Yeah.
I think I've just over time realized you're not going to have all the answers. And I don't think anybody at any stage of their career has all the answers. even
Yes,
if
that's so true.
even if people say they do, I promise, I don't think anybody has all the answers. But for me, what I have learned in this area is you don't need all the answers, but what you do need is I have this person I can reach out to if I need help on something or if I need a little bit more clarity on. I'm not a tax expert by any means. If I got a tax question, it would be like I could do some research on it and could understand it to some degree. But I also have someone that I can call and be like, "Hey, I need help. This is out of my element." That's really helped me to just to your point, that self-limiting belief of I don't have all the answers prevented me from taking risks and starting something like this sooner. I just said, well, let me just surround myself with people who can help if I need it. And there you go.
That's awesome. But then you think about networking. Networking feels awkward. Okay. Let's be honest here.
Yep.
It feels awkward. Even on LinkedIn, for me to send a connection request, I'm like shaking. Okay. I'm like,
Yep.
okay, I have a whole Google Docs of little blurbs that I can say in my connection request. And when I don't know what to say, I just hit connect and hope for the best. And I'm an extrovert. What are some tips you may have in terms of networking? Because again, you mentioned it a couple times already. Networking, surrounding yourself with the right people, being able to ask those questions, ask leaders or big accounts on LinkedIn. What are some tips you can share to ease it? I don't say it's going to be easy, but at least to get you somewhere.
It's a good question. I mean, I always just start with who are those people in my circle who are maybe a step ahead that I trust and that I know they're not going to be bothered if I just ask them a question. And so I would start with them and be like, "Hey, do you have anybody that would be awesome to connect me with?" And maybe take a step back. If I'm the person reaching out to connect, what is my intent to connect? What is that thing I want? What do I
Mm,
want to learn or what do I want to understand in connecting with somebody? If you go to someone you trust who has maybe a step ahead of you and you say, "Hey, I want to learn about how to make better decisions in finance." That person is going to be like, "Oh yeah, no problem. Here's one person or here's two people I'd love to connect you." And in that connection to that person, they're going to say, "Hey, they would love to talk about, they know you're an expert in this area. They would love to understand how you make decisions." To me, that makes it more natural. I think that's more of a natural way to do it.
yes, getting the introduction. Yeah, being introduced rather than going cold turkey.
I would say another way is just even before you reach out, just follow for a while and just comment on posts and just understand what they talk about and what they're interested in. And then when you reach out, you can
Mm.
say, "Hey, I noticed you talk about forecasting a lot. I'd really love to learn more. I know you're an expert in that field. Could you help me?" That also, I think, makes it a little more natural.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. But then what about when you are in person events? Because I'm an extrovert. I know a lot of other people in finance accounting are introverts. So going to events or meetups could be a little awkward. Do you have any tips or anything to share there?
I do. And I just reached over to my bookshelf is right next to me. And I grabbed,
Uh-huh.
I don't know if this is going to show up backwards on camera or not, but
Oh
this book
yes.
is like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. This book completely changed how I approach networking events. One of the things he talks about in there was people love to talk about themselves and not being the person in the conversation where you're thinking about how am I going to respond, but like listening to what is the other person saying and just ask questions. When you get the urge to talk about yourself, just ask another question about them and just like continuing to do that. And that I think will make conversation a little bit more, natural and it can be awkward. Networking events are awkward for everybody. I'll admit it.
It
I'm more of
is.
an extrovert and I still am like walking into a room. I'm like, I don't really want to go in here. But I have like maybe two or three go-to questions that I know are going to help me open up the conversation to then like dive a little
Okay.
deeper. So I try to start with those.
What are those questions?
Yeah, I mean the
Mm.
first one. So I forget where I heard this. They just said, why did you get into your current field? Is it something you're passionate about? Was it a connection? And that can open up a ton of different things. On the career side, on the personal side, I always love to ask like, "Oh, are you from Atlanta? Or are you from?" Because Atlanta naturally is a
Yes.
lot of people are from everywhere, so that's an easy
Yes.
one. And then "Hey, how'd you hear about the event today?" So you kind of have three different things. You have the first one is a career thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
how did you get into your current field? The second one is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a personal thing, like, "Oh, I went to college at here. I went to, now I'm in Atlanta." The third one is more of I'm looking for a mutual connection. So the third one is, how did you hear about the event? Oh, I know, so-and-so. Oh, I do too. That's interesting. And so you kind of have three different buckets of connection points. Yeah.
Wow, I love your strategy. I'm definitely stealing that.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And if those don't work, just say, how about this weather? This weather's good too. That's my last. I'm like, when I'm really awkward, I start talking about the weather.
Atlanta weather. We're both in Atlanta. So we know how during this week alone, we went from summer, winter, fall, winter. And now yesterday I went out in a onesie outside. Yes, I wore my onesie. My daughter wants a onesie. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in a onesie at this age, but it felt good.
Hey, it was cold yesterday. I'm not going to lie. It was way too cold for November.
Yes. All right. So I have one last question for you, which is, if you had to pass along one piece of wisdom to the next generation of finance leaders, what would it be?
I made this mistake way longer in my career than I wish I would have, but it is learn to make complicated things simple. So if you're doing this big analysis, put a summary page and boil it down to, how can this leader understand this in 30 seconds to a minute, the high points? How can they understand this very quickly? That will go so far in your career.
Wow, that is so good though. Oh, 500% agree, because now I appreciate people, as a CFO, I appreciate people who do that for me.
Yes, 100%.
And yes, I will promote somebody because you only have so much time. There's so many things going on, and you're also dealing with people who are not from a finance and accounting background. So what you just said of making something complex simple is totally an underrated skill. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. I wish I would have heard this 10 years ago.
Same here. Same here. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for being on the show. You shared so many great resources. I will ping you again for the name of the book and any other books you may have for us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me on today.
And that's it for today's episode of the Diary of the CFO. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing such great insight with us today. If you would like me to cover any other topic in the future, don't forget to email me at ask@thediaryofthecfo.com. If you're interested in working with Stephen and own a not-for-profit, want to start a not-for-profit, definitely network with him and visit his website at moneypathfba.com. Again, his website is moneypathfba.com. Thank you so much and see you soon.